CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson is joining us now. And Jessica, you've been listening to the arguments. We know that kind of the arguments going in on President Trump's side, and we heard his lawyer, very distinctive voice. It was going to have to do with what he's calling presidential immunity, and also this concept of double jeopardy. That even if he did do something wrong, he's already been tried a couple of times already, and through the impeachment process. So let's start here. Jessica, just tell me kind of how things started in the case. Did you hear anything surprising? What were the legal arguments that you heard today?
I heard things that indicate that this did not go well for the former president. I heard things that I absolutely want to take for audio in my class when I teach presidential immunity, because the first thing I teach is that this is a limited privilege. It's not an absolute privilege like Trump is arguing here. So what the Trump team was arguing is essentially that you need to be impeached before you could ever be tried in a criminal court. And then there was this hypothetical that I thought was devastating for the Trump team, where there was an up and back about, well, what if a president orders the SEAL team, an official act, to assassinate a political rival and then immediately resigns so they can't be impeached? Are you really saying that that person would be immune from criminal prosecution? I thought that was a bad argument for a bad moment for the Trump team. There was another moment also dealing with this question of impeachment that I thought was bad for the Trump team, because they're saying you're absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. But then what the judges really got them to admit is, but you're saying only if there is first an impeachment. You're admitting that if there's first an impeachment, then there can be a criminal trial. And then there was this up and back about, if that's true, don't the rest of your arguments about presidential immunity really fall away? Now, obviously, there was an hour of arguments. There was a lot more detail in there. But to me, those were the two moments that stuck out where I thought the president is not winning this argument. We thought this before. The three of us have talked about this, but I thought those were bad moments.
So the lawyers for the former president are arguing that not giving him immunity would open former presidents, other presidents, up to prosecution. What do you make by that argument?
This is a common argument we've heard from Trump throughout in all of his cases, which is this is unprecedented. There has never been a former president who has faced in Georgia its state charges, or the federal election interference case we're talking about, or the case dealing with Mar-a-Lago, or even the New York civil fraud case that we've discussed. And I think that argument isn't doing as much work as the Trump team thinks it is. It merely points out that we haven't had a president who's engaged in this type of behavior before. So that's really what the Department of Justice responded, which is that just shows you, judges, how very serious the actions that Trump took were. So this idea of it's unprecedented, it's never happened before, I think the Department of Justice was very smart in pointing out that's because we've never been here before. The other response to that is we've had, obviously, many, many presidents, and the fact that we've never been here before shows that there is not a Pandora's box that would open. And again, I didn't think that the Trump team won a lot of points on that question.
So why does President Nixon's name keep coming up in this hearing?
President Nixon's name keeps coming up because the two big cases that the D.C. Circuit is going to look at both involve President Nixon. In one case, President Nixon was sued in a civil capacity, essentially for unlawful termination. And what the court there said is presidents are absolutely immune from civil suit. We're talking, of course, about a criminal case when it comes to Trump, from civil suit for official acts. And that's why you heard a lot of discussion about, is this an official act? Is it not an official act? The answer, of course, has to be that's something we look at, but this is a criminal case. The other reason that President Nixon's name keeps coming up is that there's a different case dealing with those tapes, those secret tapes that he made in the Oval Office. We know that there was an investigation into the Watergate scandal by the special counsel. The special counsel said, we need those tapes. President Nixon said, you don't get them because I have executive immunity. The Supreme Court said there is a thing called executive immunity, but it is limited, and we have to allow criminal prosecutions to proceed. That's a bad case for the former president. It's a good case for the Department of Justice. That's why the Trump team doesn't bring that case up a lot. But that's why we talk about Nixon, because he's involved in two of the big presidential cases that are going to give the D.C. Circuit guidance in this area.
There was another really kind of weird exchange, Jessica, and I was trying to follow along. But Judge Pan asked this question, and I'm going to quote here so I don't get it wrong. Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Right? You were just talking a little bit about that, but I want for the viewers to hear the actual quote so that they can understand the context here. Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? That's an official act, an order to SEAL Team 6. And John Sauer says he would have to be and would speedily be, impeached, convicted before the criminal prosecution. And the judge says, but there would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that. And he says, Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison, so going way, way back, Marbury versus Madison and our Constitution in the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not. And the judge then says, I asked a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached be subject to criminal prosecution if he were impeached and convicted? So the answer is no, Judge Pan says.
So this is a question where the judges are really trying to push the Trump team to say, let me give you hypotheticals and then tell me again that your client gets to wrap themselves up in presidential immunity and completely avoid prosecution. It's also a question where the judges are pushing the bounds of that issue we were just talking about, official acts versus non-official acts. For people watching at home, I think what we want them to take away is this is the exchange. Vlad, you were absolutely right to zero in it. This is one of the big exchanges in the hour-long arguments that we heard. And what it proves is that, in my view, of course, presidents are not immune from criminal prosecution, even if they undertake official acts, because we see, what if you tell the army, you know what you should do? You should go kill the governor of California because he's really annoying me. What if you're not impeached first? Can it truly be that you cannot be criminally prosecuted? Or Vlad, as we talked about in the very beginning, what if you say, go kill the governor of California? That's an official act. But then you resign before you can be impeached. So there can be no impeachment first. Is it really the case that you could avoid criminal prosecution? I think that's why that exchange was so devastating for Trump's arguments here, because it can't be that you can avoid criminal prosecution in those circumstances.
Right, but John Sauer seems to be saying, yeah, that for sure. But what the founders were arguing is the criminal process being applied for political purposes is, I guess, the case that they're making. I'm being told that we only have 45 seconds, Jessica. But he seems to be saying, yeah, for sure, if that happened, that would be bad. But this is different.
He's saying this is different because he's saying we're not talking about official acts that are as clearly criminal, essentially. But that's his only place to go, right? His only place to go is we're not talking about a political assassination. We're talking about official acts dealing with an election.
All right, Jessica, thank you very much.
That was awesome. Thank you, Jessica.